Um, Currently, I'm reading Becoming Who We Are, which is trans stories, and everything about this book is trans. It's about our trans elders. It's written by trans graphic novelists and illustrated by trans illustrators, which is really cool. And it's my current book club pick for my teen LGBTQ book club. And my wheelhouse is young adult and children's literature, specifically LGBTQ materials. I also enjoy adult romance and fantasy, or as it's called, romantasy these days.
Awesome. Thanks, Caroline. All right. So, folks, if you'd like to follow along, you're welcome to with our slides and our handout. I'm dropping the link to both in the chat. And again, you'll have access to these later. But just an agenda for what we're going to cover. We'll start off with background. So we'll talk about the history of the genre, some key titles, and then we'll go into novelists, and I'll show you a couple of tools for searching for graphic novels and manga, as well as some resources that Novelist has put together so that you can dive deeper into these formats, some tips for marketing and outreach, and then we will definitely make sure to have time for Q&A. So starting off with some background and key titles, Caroline, would you want to share the term graphic novel for us?
Sure. The term graphic novel is a fairly newish term. It was coined in the 60s and then was popularized in the 1980s with the rise of more literature-esque graphic novel or comics such as Mouse, Watchmen, and other books by like Alan Moore and Frank Miller. And we now use that term to encompass any story that is told visually.
Um, so another graphic novel definition provided by the graphic novel creator and cartoonist Jessica Abel is images used in a sequence. So yes, it can draw from the history of comics and using panels. And if you want to deep dive into that definition that she provides, there's a fantastic infographic that has a Creative Commons license that I've linked to in that slide. All right. And we now have a question for you all. So this will be a poll that I'll launch now. How would you define graphic novel? All right. And now I'm going to share out that poll. So we have most people saying a story told visually or comics bound like a book. Nobody chose not real literature, which is good. You passed the first test. That's something that we do want to stress throughout the webinar is there are so many different trick question, Quentin, exactly. There are so many different modes and opportunities for storytelling in graphic novels that make it such a visually and story-wise such an appealing format for our patrons. And so one question that we also wanted to ask you all, and feel free to share in the chat, is your favorite graphic novel. So Laura's sharing The Arrival by Sean Tan. Really incredible illustration in that one. Mouse, Fun Home, Heartstopper, On a Sunbeam. And it's okay if you don't have one as well. It is a really tough choice, Alex. If I had to pick, I would say, and this is, a standard of graphic novels, is Watchmen by Alan Moore. I think that kind of opened the gates for me, and I will always remember it.
I don't know if I actually have a favorite because I love so many, but I do love the three memoir comics that Rainier Telgemeier did. Those were just so special, especially Smile with like her like oral journey that she goes through with the braces and oral surgeries as a mom with two kids who have many oral problems in their mouth. It's one that I end up returning to for lots of like hope.
Just a brief history of comics and graphic novels. So I wanted to kind of show the long lineage of comics and graphic novels. So in the 19th century with political cartoons and newspapers, that is kind of where things kind of start off with that storytelling. And then in the 1930s, the 70s, with that golden age of comics. So you have your superhero comics starting up around that time, as well as sci-fi and horror comics. I'd be remiss to not share those and how influential those are. And then in the 1970s and 80s, much more experimentation and kind of development of what we now know to be graphic novels. A lot of storytelling coming from Japan with Akira and other titles, a lot of Japanese creators becoming popular, as well as alternative comics magazines like Raw, and then Alan Moore, such a foundational creator in the genre format, with Watchmen being that initial one. And then in the 1980s to the present, a lot more kind of mainstream popularity, understanding of graphic novels as an avenue of autobiographical storytelling with Persepolis, as well as a lot more female queer comics creators, graphic novelists, gaining popularity and interest in the 1980s to the present. And we also wanted to share kind of why read graphic novels.
As a children's librarian, I end up recommending graphic novels quite often. It's such a great way to rope in your reluctant readers, especially kids who have not connected with a novel or a story. Graphic novels are a great stepping stone into having reading being a more daily habit. It also bridges the gap between picture books and chapter books. I know easy readers have their place, but they do get very repetitive, and I know that repetition is there for a reason. But it is more interesting to read an early graphic novel that also tells a story visually for a young beginning reader. It helps with reading comprehension and visual literacy, as you can follow the story and get visual cues about what's going on in the story, even if you are struggling with some of the words. And they're just really fun to read. And the best way to make lifelong readers is making the activity fun at the very beginning.
And then another reason for reading graphic novels is because you're working with images and text in combination, you're using panels or maybe even not. There's such an incredible art variety and cool experiments with the form. Here are a couple of examples. So On a Sunbeam, I think is just absolutely beautiful. I know it was one that was mentioned in the chat. Hawkeye, using American Sign Language as part of graphic novel storytelling. And then Sabrina, which I think is a really interesting graphic novel. I think it was the first graphic novel to win the Man Booker Prize, which is a British literary award. But that is a really fantastic graphic novel about isolation and modernity. So these are just a couple of examples of experimenting with that form. And then here are some gateway graphic novels.
So with like gateway graphic novels, these might be like first time graphic novels. I know a bunch of people mentioned Watchmen in the chat, and Watchmen is a great one. But I included the Killing Joke here to be like a recommendation for people who like superheroes but don't know really where to start with like graphic novels or like comic books. It's really dark though, but it is a good like um, meditation on like Batman and Batman's morality, and also you get to see like a very unplayful side of the Joker, which I think is how we've been seeing the Joker represented in um, media and movies these days. Is this a more scary, chaotic creature versus the Joker that was in like the 1960s live action TV show. Fun Home is a great entry point into memoir graphic novels. It is a memoir about Alison Bechdel's relationship with her father. Alison Bechdel is a queer woman, and her father ran a funeral home, and he was in the closet and also queer. And so she explores her relationship and memories with her father. Bone is not a graphic novel that I have personally read, but what has been like on like my recommendation list, I recommend it a lot for readers of all ages, just because it is a fun story and a good like what is a comic? What is a graphic novel? And so I end up that is still fun and accessible and has adult appeal as well as appeal for children. And then Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I know in Durham County it is cataloged as fiction versus like a graphic novel, but it does take so many elements of a graphic novel, even though there is a lot of text in telling the story in Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And it's, again, a great entry point for children into graphic novels. And then they can kind of go from there to explore other graphic novels that are full of humor, like Captain Underpants or Dogman.
And then I wanted to share some of the superhero comics and how Marvel and DC have also their main characters of these comics have changed over time, as well as nonfiction, fiction authors like Ta-Nehisi Coates have started to participate in comics and graphic novels and creating graphic novels. So the Black Panther series, but also the Miles Morales series. So I know so many kids love the Into the Spider-Verse movies. And so having that graphic novel tie-in can be a great way to share with a child coming to the library. Oh, you loved Into the Spider-Verse. Did you know that the library has some of the Miles Morales comics? Whistle is a female lead character in Gotham City. So another example of like these superhero stories growing over time. And then one thing that you can do within Novelist is search for alternative comics. So ones that aren't necessarily about superheroes, but are about maybe lived experiences. Hot Comb is an award winner from 2020. And in Novelist Plus, it's categorized as both alternative comics and graphic novels. And it's about African-American hair, the history of it, experiences in salons. It has a really fun black and white illustration style and is very authentic. So if you're looking for a nonfiction graphic novel, this is a really great one to check out. And I just found it through searching GN Alternative Comics, and I'll show you how to use that field code in Novelist. One thing that we were talking about and we really wanted to stress was graphic novels are a format and not necessarily a genre. Every genre that you can think of is encompassed within graphic novels. So the Saga series is a long-running sci-fi series by Brian K. Vaughan. That has incredible world building. The Low, Low Woods I love because I'm a huge fan of creepy, spooky stories. And Carmen Maria Machado is a fiction author who then created this comic and graphic novel. And then I know folks mentioned Lore Olympus, but that can be an incredible fantasy gateway graphic novel that's easy to find in Novelist. And I'm seeing a bunch of people in the chats sharing how much they love Saga and how good it is. But I think that's one that it's just so well done that I feel like it's great for libraries to kind of highlight these ones that might be moving beyond Watchmen, Mouse, some common Fun Home, some mainstream graphic novels that have a certain popularity to share Saga and some of the others. Historical fiction and Western. So one that I really love is Hark a Vagrant, which is really historical fiction, nonfiction, but Kate Beaton's illustration style is very cartoony, almost like newspaper comics. And she's kind of interpreting or retelling certain stories. I believe she's Canadian, so then she brings in little strips, stories of like Canadian history in a very funny way. But that's a really great historical graphic novel that if you have your patrons that say, okay, I love historical fiction or reading nonfiction about history, this might be a graphic novel to explore. Indy, the story of the Apache Wars. This one I selected because I think it's a great example of how graphic novels can, through their visuals, introduce you and situate you in a time and place. And this being a period of time that I feel like I did not learn a lot about in high school or in middle school growing up about Native American history. I just think this is a really great one that Ethan Hawke and Greg Ruth created. And then Coyote Dog Girl, I love the illustration style. It's very colorful and kind of watercolory and very dreamlike. And so I think that's a really great pick for a Western graphic novel. Romance. So I am not a huge romance reader, but earlier in the year, I had this title recommended to me by a friend who was saying, okay, this is Regency romance, but in a graphic novel. And once I took a look at like the first couple panels, I was hooked because the art style is fantastic. It's great for romance readers who know that they love the common tropes of fake relationship. They want something that's kind of romantic, but has a really detailed art style. So this is one that I could see bringing in romance readers who know they love the genre, but aren't necessarily those that think of themselves as graphic novel readers. And for me, as somebody who didn't think of themselves as a romance reader before this title, I think it's kind of introduced me to the genre in a great way. Nonfiction can be a great way to bring in the non-graphic novel readers. And it's also a good way to, I think, create certain displays around personal experiences and maybe some tough topics in the library. So can we talk about something more pleasant? It's just one of my favorite books, period. It's a graphic novel memoir by Roz Shast about her experiences caring for her aging parents, as well as dealing with their deaths. And I just think she's so funny. New Yorker cartoonist who then created this graphic novel memoir. And with these titles, they're also going to be the ones that patrons see on People magazine or New York Times bestseller list. Another one that graphic novel creator, cartoonist that I love is Lucy Knisley. She has a lot of fantastic cartoons about parenting and new parenthood. So for your patrons who might be new parents, I think this is a great one to include on book displays. and bringing them in and seeing that it can be a great way to broach difficult topics. And so this is one that I suggested to check out.
And then with graphic novels becoming more and more popular, it's such a great way to tell all kinds of stories. And there are so many more diverse authors and inclusive titles that we can make sure that we have in our collections, so that when we have all of our different readers from all walks of life come into the library, they can read stories that reflect their own stories, and they can see themselves in fiction or in these fictional characters, or they can have their worlds opened up and learn about other cultures, other experiences, and other lives. Some of the titles that I have here are Stargazing by Jen Wang. I actually have met Jen Wang in real life, and she is fantastic. I love how she is able to talk about like Asian culture in this story. I know most people know her for her other graphic novel, The Prince and the Dressmaker, which is more of a like historical romance title. But this one really delves into Asian culture. Genderqueer, which I know was mentioned in the chat, is a fantastic adult memoir about gender and growing up, and not and having and like questioning your gender and figuring out what gender means to you. It is also a title that you could recommend to older teens. I know that Genderqueer in particular has been on like the banned books list. I think it's the #1 banned book in ALA's banned book list. Either this year or last year, but it's still a very good title and has a lot of like good information, and is a great way for teens who are dealing with gender issues or want to see a trans experience that is close to what they are experiencing. It is a good title. El Defo is a another memoir of the illustrator C.C. Bell, and growing up deaf. It has her very like signature style where everyone is kind of like a cutesy anthropomorphic rabbit. It's very cute. I personally love this title just because of how she describes deafness or her experience with being deaf as hearing people underwater. And so when a relative who I'm close with of mine started experiencing deafness and she started describing it that way, it was a great way to connect with her on that with her. And then Miss Marvel by G. Willow Wilson is one of my favorite superhero comics of all time. It's just so much fun, and it's so great, and the artwork is beautiful. And G. Willow Wilson really makes this character her own, and it's such a great fun title.
One thing that we discussed was titles for all ages. So titles that are child appropriate, but also have adult appeal. One thing that you can do in Novelist is search GN, which is the field code for genre, adult books for young adults, and the March graphic novel series about John Lewis's life comes up. I know that's one that's been used in library book clubs in the past. It can be a great community read because it has the appeal and is also age appropriate. So that's something that you can do within Novelist. And then graphic novels for younger readers. I know we recommended a lot of titles for adults as well as for teens, but as we mentioned, graphic novels can be a great way to rope in those reluctant readers.
And so for these titles, a lot of graphic novels for younger readers or beginning readers are very cutesy. A lot of the main characters are going to be animals, as you know, evidenced by all these titles that got picked this time around. But there's a lot of fun. They rely a lot on humor and cutesiness. Narwhal, Unicorn of the Sea. looks very familiar, or like it looks like a picture book, and is such a great stepping stone from picture books, if they wanted to bypass easy readers, or if easy readers are just not feeling as engaging. Narwhal Unicorn of the Sea is a lot of fun, and it relies so much on like cutesy fun humor that a 6 or a 7-year-old would find a lot of like humor in, and they are fun to read with kids too. Especially like Narwhal Unicorn of the Sea is a great one. Mr. Wolf's Class is very heartwarming, and so is Owly. But they are very cute graphic novels. There are more examples, but these ones I thought kind of encompassed the feeling of like what a graphic novel for a 6 to 9-year-old would be like.
And then here are some graphic novels for ages 9 through 12. So these are all award winners, not just for the comic graphic novel specific award winners, awards that we'll refer to later on in the session, but also for the National Book Award. And so The Magic Fish by Trung Le Nguyen is a great coming of age story about a Vietnamese, it's autobiographical, so it's about his life being Vietnamese American, and also about his own experience with coming out. Swim Team by Johnny Christmas. Johnny Christmas has some great titles, especially in terms of reflecting middle school kids and their experiences and challenges. And Mexikid is a really fun road trip graphic novel. So this is one that is, as its quote at the top says, it's really funny, but it's about this kid who goes on a family road trip to Mexico to meet some of his relatives. And one thing that I wanted to kind of mention with all of these titles is really in the last 10 or 15 years or so, graphic novels have started to get mainstream award recognition, not just graphic novel specific award recognition from awards like the Man Booker Prize, National Book Award long list. And so that's something that I think as these literary awards are starting to recognize the value of graphic novels, our patrons should as well. And so I think that's a great opportunity to kind of highlight how for your patrons that, you know, are very focused on award winners and bestsellers, highlighting some of these titles in different areas of the library can be helpful. And then just some YA graphic novels. So these are all different experiences for teens. Sanctuary being one about the experience of being undocumented, A First Time for Everything, about the experience of traveling to Europe in middle school. In Limbo by Deborah Lee is just beautiful illustration about a Korean American girl going to travel to South Korea. And I think one of the things that I wanted to stress with these selections is there's such a variety of the human experience that can be illustrated in graphic novels. And sometimes they can take the tone of being really funny, and other times it can be much more like somber or personal or introspective. And so these are a couple of titles that I think are great for teens. We also, as we mentioned, graphic novels and manga. So you can search for manga in Novelist in a couple of different ways. I've included some of the codes at the top. So one thing to keep in mind is manga is the Japanese term. Manhwa is the Korean term. And so I've included those at the top if you want to search and find all the latest manga in Novelist. But here are a couple of different examples. The selection from China, The Library by Chi Hoi, is all hand-drawn, pencil-drawn, and it's very surreal and kind of dreamlike. And so that's one that with manga, I think there's a certain art style or storyline that people come to expect, but there's also different titles that can appeal to readers, and that art style being a great way to draw people in. Because we are turning the corner on Halloween season coming upon us and fall starting right now, I did want to highlight Junji Ito. That is a great, yeah, Uzumaki by Ito is terrifying. Junji Ito is definitely dark. But one thing that you can do within Novelist is search by theme. So if you have your patrons who are horror fans, one thing that you can do with book displays is mention search for more comics using the theme creature feature in Novelist Plus, or, you know, if you know that you like this author, here's a recommendation that's related. Or if you have your patrons, you know, Uzumaki is something that is terrifying, but it's also Adult Swim has adapted Uzumaki and is releasing it, I think, in the next year as a TV series. So it is incredibly recognizable at this point. And I think it's very much a gateway for horror graphic novel fans is Uzumaki. So that's something to share. Blackjack, I think, is fantastic. Oh, Alex is sharing the 28th of this month, this year, is when that Uzumaki series on Adult Swim is being released. So that's something too, is with the art style, you can find your patrons who really like that. And it's always good anytime there's a big adaptation that comes out, whether it's a TV show or a movie, having patrons know that they can check out the comic, the book, whatever it is from the library. It's a great tie-in. And Caroline sharing the Cat Diary is fantastic because it uses his scary art style and is about being a cat parent. Yes, that's a great example to share.
And then with children and teens manga, a lot of these titles you might find like really recognizable, or might have seen like, you know, a teen walk out of your library with like a stack this high. Um, can feel a little intimidating, especially with the long running manga titles such as One Piece or Naruto. I think One Piece is in like 107 or like in the 170s with like volumes. So it can feel intimidating to try and get into that and like, you know, feel like you have enough knowledge to recommend it to future readers. But so I'm trying to like demystify a lot of the children and teens manga. It tends to be a bit more gendered than adult manga. With children and teens manga, it's separated into two categories. Shonen, which is more for boys or feature like male main characters. They're more action oriented, and Sojo, which is more for girls, so to speak, which usually has a like a female main character. There's usually a love story. But just because these titles are like more gendered, it doesn't mean that a girl couldn't find a lot of like fun reading Naruto, and a boy couldn't find a lot of like enjoyment in like getting into the like magical girl comics like Sailor Moon. But there's a lot of fun titles like Kami-sama Kiss, which is a just a fun little romance story involving, I believe, like a fox spirit. One Punch Man is a funny action comic about a superhero who is so strong that he can kill all of his enemies with just one punch. So he's very like upset with life because like nothing feels like a challenge. Fruits Basket is one of my personal favorites next to Sailor Moon. Fruits Basket is about a girl who encounters a family who has a curse where if they're hugged by the opposite sex, or they turn into members of the Chinese zodiac, or the animals from the Chinese zodiac. And she has to break the curse. And then Full Metal Alchemist is I feel like Full Metal Alchemist is so like it's not dense, but it covers so many different themes and topics. But it's two brothers who are trying to get back to how they were after messing around with alchemy. I'm making this sound really lighthearted. It's a very like sad comic, but it is still very good and popular for a reason. I know Full Metal Alchemist was popular when I was a teen, and it still, you know, is being checked out to this day. but there's so many other titles, and so don't let the like long running titles or the many volumes dissuade you from getting or trying out a children and teens manga. There's some that just are still just really fun to go back to. I will go back to my favorites every now and then, and again, those favorites are Fruits Basket and Sailor Moon. But they're just a lot of fun and very popular with teens. And there are some titles that have like video game tie-ins, like My Hero Academia, and I know Legend of Zelda has its own comic books, and there are some graphic novels that are based on like Hayao Miyazaki films like Nausicaa. So yeah.
One thing before we get into novelists is you can find a lot of international graphic novels in the resource itself as recommendations. For folks who are joining this, you might already be familiar, but there is such a deep history of comics and graphic novels in Franco-Belgian countries. So this is an example, Aya, Life in Yop City, which is about the main character, Aya, and her friends in Côte d'Ivoire. I was just really drawn to the art style, the colors, and I think, as we mentioned, graphic novels can be a doorway or a mirror or window or a mirror. This is a great example of finding an international graphic novel in Novelist Plus and it being a window into another world, another experience. There's also just been a key trend of a lot of translations happening for graphic novels. So this is a story from Argentina where they have a huge history of graphic novel storytelling. This is a story from 1969, a dystopian sci-fi that has now been translated, adapted into a graphic novel. And I just, in exploring the art style, just drew me in. And so that's something that can be a nice point of reference for fans who already have their favorites, digging deeper, finding some translations using Novelist. And I'll show you how to do that as well. Another thing that's been a really key trend is graphic novel adaptations of popular stories like The Babysitter's Club, Monster by Walter Dean Myers. When I was a high school teacher, Walter Dean Myers, as well as a couple other authors were just like so popular. And so that is a good example of kind of potentially bringing in a reluctant reader is by having them read the graphic novel adaptation. Parable of the Sower, fantastic sci-fi speculative fiction story by Octavia Butler that has been recently adapted into a graphic novel. This is also a nice way collection development wise for patrons if you're developing a display or if the print title is checked out, recommending that graphic novel because that might be a gateway into the format for a patron. So using Novelist Plus. Yes, Octavia Butler rules. I love Octavia Butler. So one thing to start off with are the grab and go reading lists, and I'll show those in the platform in just a bit. But if you go to the homepage, you'll see all of the recommended reading lists on the left-hand side, and those are arranged by age range as well as by genre. Here are the screenshots of the graphic novels and manga sections for adult, teen, and ages 9 through 12. And so you can click on these lists and then it takes you to a page where you have like 10 or so different recommendations, and these can be great starters for patrons. It also can be good if you're looking for different read-alikes or maybe exploring a genre. So maybe you have a patron that loves superhero comics but wants to start reading more sci-fi graphic novels. You can use these grab and go reading lists as a nice starting point. The genre guides are fantastic. So these are great for if you want to kind of dig deep into a particular genre, understand the history of it, see some key titles or series, see some authors to watch and kind of keep your eyes on, and then also some tips for marketing to graphic novel fans. So Here are the genre guide, manga for teens, as well as the genre guide, graphic novels for adults. And so these, if you're feeling like you have, pretty confident footing in graphic novels, this might not be for you, but it might be for your colleague who feels completely unfamiliar with graphic novels. They're a great starting point for staff training. So those lists I'll show you in just a sec, where the genre guides and the recommended reads lists are. And then the other major point that I'll show you in this tour of Novelist is the story elements index. They've added a lot more terms for graphic novels and manga that you can use to search in the platform really easily. I like to call the story elements index your kind of landing base in the platform. It's where they list all the genres that are used to categorize recommendations in Novelist, all the themes, so like common tropes of a genre, like fake relationship and romance, all those themes are listed in the story elements index, as well as appeals. Appeals are related to story, character, and mood. So appeals can be like feel good or dark or menacing, or a strong sense of place. And so I'll show you these 3 points in just a sec. It can also be a great place to find illustration appeal terms. So I know somebody mentioned in the chat at the beginning, they love The Arrival by Sean Tan. It is now on my to be read list because I used the illustration search in the story elements index for surreal illustration. And I found this title, which I had never heard of before, and it looks amazing. It's wordless, but it has this incredible illustration style that's so surreal. And so now I'm going to hop into Novelist and show you what that looks like. Right. So as I mentioned, this is the homepage of Novelist. With these recommended reads lists, you can switch between age ranges. So you can go adult, teen, ages 9 through 12. And then let's say you want to find shoujo and shonen manga for ages 9 through 12. If you click on this list, it gives you some recommended reads to check out, like Fruits Basket, and some other titles. One thing that you'll notice is once you're logged in with your library in Novelist, all the content in Novelist, every book page, every author page, every recommended reads list or genre guide is going to have a permanent link here. You can copy that, and that can be a great thing to include in a QR code next to a book display. If you are highlighting some manga in your library, you can have a QR code that says explore more, and it links to this list. Another thing that you can use this for is in email newsletters if you want to have patrons get the most out of this platform, or on social media, letting patrons know that they can kind of explore their tastes. These recommended reads lists are a great thing to link to. And so ages 9 through 12, and then looking for adult reads, looking maybe at horror graphic novels, and then finding some examples here. And that's one thing as well, is I didn't want to include all of the recommended reads in our presentation because these are some more titles that you can explore. To find the genre guides that I mentioned, you'll go to quick links and then genre guides. And with this list, you can sort it by relevance or date newest or oldest. But this example of graphic novels for older kids, I'm going to click on it, and it provides a great definition up here, some top themes to search. So assemble, origin story, princess power, why do older kids like graphic novels, key authors to know, foundations of graphic novels like Tintin and Bone and Asterix, and then help with marketing. as well as some searches to try. So these are a good place for staff as kind of a starting point. And then if I go back, I can search through these lists and find manga for older kids, genre guide. And this provides more of a definition of the terms like shonen and shoujo, common themes, excuse me, and some key titles. So again, I go to quick links and genre guides, and that's how I'm able to find the age and genre specific guides here. Under quick links, you'll also find the story elements index. And this is where you can explore. So if I go to genres, I can see these searches. And I can click on these links and search for various comics. So if I want to search for, let's see here. Let's go with just comics and graphic novels. Then you can see, you can sort this list by relevance. This is 26,000 titles. So I'm going to add some more limiters. I'm going to add fantasy comics. I can also sort by date. So if I want to see what's forthcoming, I can narrow down this list. If I want to add in the theme of chosen one, I can add it. And now I have 40 to choose from, which is very different from 26,000. So that's one way that you can take a broad search, like all the comics and graphic novels in the story elements index, click on it, and then narrow it using the filters on the left-hand side. In the story elements index, if you go to appeals, you can search by appeals for story, character, mood, style, identities, and then illustration as well. So if you are really drawn to, let's see, a textured art style, or you really like a lavish art style or something that's really delicate, you can click delicate, and then you can select under genre comics and graphic novels. And then you see the example of Fangirl, the manga, and some other titles here. The Plain Janes, and then adding in different appeal terms that you might like. So this is a nice way to browse. One thing as well, when you click on the title, I've logged in with a library that has the on the shelf feature with novelists. So they've linked their catalog. And I believe they're an NC Cardinal library, but it allows you to see what copies are available. And that's a nice feature to encourage patron use of the platform, is it really helps if they can search in the platform and then see what's available from the library. Anytime you want to clear your search in Novelist, know that you can click on that logo icon in the top left, and then it'll take you back to the home page. Now we have a couple more tips for using Novelist. Here's a list of some relevant character setting and plot appeals, like Sidekick Spotlight or Academies of Magic or To the Rescue. Another thing that you can do in Novelist is search for award winners. So here are some comic and graphic novel awards like the Eisner Award or the Harvey Awards. You can find years and years worth of award winners listed if you go to browse by and then award winners, which I'll show you what that looks like. But award winners are just a great way, if you're new to a genre, to orient yourself and find what has been noteworthy, popular, and then explore more from there. So let me jump into here and share if you go to browse by and then award winners. You have these ones that are popular awards by age range, but then if you go to the right-hand side and see awards by type, you can see comic and graphic novel. And then what you can do is sort this list, date newest to see the newest ones. Like, let's say we want to see the Glyph Comic Awards and find some titles recommended here. You can see some listed. And then let's say you want to go through and find Ignatz Awards, Outstanding Graphic Novel. You can see all these ones listed, like Hot Comb. My favorite thing is Monsters. These can be a great avenue for exploration for patrons as well, because my favorite thing is Monsters came out, 7 years ago, but it is still popular and it still can be a gateway graphic novel for a patron. So that's something to keep in mind, is this list can be an evergreen source, these award winners lists. If I go back to the home page, I'm just going to clear my search. All right. And then another thing that I want to share in the platform. So let's go. I'm just going to figure character setting plot appeals. We're going to go into helping readers and then we'll jump back in the platform. But any questions? Eleanor's asking, can you explain the definition of alternative comics in that story element index? Does it include other ones like horror comics, just not superhero? It can include both. So like what you'll see with a particular title is it could be listed as a horror comic, but also as an alternative comic. And you're often seeing with the alternative comics that a title can be listed under multiple genre categories. So if I were to go back to story elements index, I'm going to go to genres and find alternative comics and see all the alternative comics listed here. You'll see these Scott Pilgrim ones at the top, but then you can add in some like humorous comics or autobiographical. I think most of the alternative comics do tend to be autobiographical or, but if you go back to that story elements index, you can search specifically for horror comics or crime comics in this list here. So if you wanted to search for horror comics, you can click on that link and search for all the horror comics in Novelist. Like if I check this one here, as you can see, if I zoom in, it's categorized as comics and graphic novels, superhero comics, and horror comics. And so that's something is like these genres aren't discrete, but they can have multiple different genres that they're categorized as. If that makes sense. What I'm going to do is jump back in and we're going to talk about helping readers. So just a couple of questions that can be helpful to ask readers if you're having a conversation at the desk, or if a patron reaches out to you or kind of sticks around after a program, is what graphic novels have you read and enjoyed? That's kind of an easy start off question to figure out what they have, what their familiarity is with the genre. what do you like to read outside of the graphic novel format? So if they're really big fans of sci-fi, sharing some sci-fi comics like Saga. You know, another question in tandem with that is like, what genres do you like and know in that kind of basic reader's advisory interview? But then also adding in what TV shows and movies are in your top 5. I think that can be a great way to figure out and kind of determine fairly easily, like what to recommend, preference for things that are maybe grisly or something that's a little bit more cozy. So these are good questions to start off with. And then another thing that you can use novelists for as you're having these sorts of conversations is if a patron says, well, I loved X title, like I loved On a Sunbeam, you can search for On a Sunbeam in novelist and then find read-alikes. So this is an example that's popular at Caroline's library, if you wanted to share.
Yeah, Dogman is one of the most popular graphic novels right now. I like to, when parents ask about it, like my book talk for Dogman for parents is it's RoboCop for kids. It's about a cop and a dog who, like a police dog, who get in like a tricky situation, and the doctors have to operate on both the uh, police dog and police officer. And the only way to fix the problem is to transplant the dog's head on the police officer's body, and he becomes Dogman, and he like fights crime. Um, and there's his like arch nemesis is Petey the cat, and there's like some like beginnings of like learning about generational trauma through Petey the cat. But it's a fun series. It's very popular. It's by Dave Pilkey, who wrote Captain Underpants. But it's a common question to recommend titles that are very similar to Dogman. So these are all titles that either feature like a like anthropomorphic animal main character, or they feature animals in some way, and they're all like humorous titles or like fighting crime titles, along with like again being very humorous. But these are fun stories for kids to again expand their world of like or find new titles to enjoy and engage with, while also remaining in a genre that they feel comfortable with. So again, these are just fun, very humorous kid titles.
And you can take that title, and all the read-alikes that we shared are listed in here. So that's a great way to kind of provide recommendations really quickly in the platform. Another question that came up in registration was like using graphic novels in book clubs and classrooms. And so I wanted to select a few titles that I think can be great for a variety of age ranges. So George Takei's memoir, They Called Us Enemy, about his experience being in an internment camp around World War II. This is something that is, from his perspective, you know, as a child growing up, autobiographical. It can be something that brings in younger readers as well as adult patrons. New Kid by Jerry Craft, I know that was listed in the genre guide of graphic novels for older kids. But that is a great title for middle grades. And then for classrooms, one thing that I thought about was there's so many great nonfiction graphic novels that aren't necessarily autobiographical, but they can be science writing, they can be about history. When I was in high school, it was around the time that the US Constitution graphic novel came out, and I was assigned it in my AP Gov class, and I include it today because it is seared in my memory. I remember at the time thinking, why is my teacher asking me to read a graphic novel? And I still remember so much from that title, so I included it here. One that was published in the last year that's fantastic science writing for a graphic novel is Hidden Systems. So water, electricity, the internet, and the secrets behind the systems we use every day. If you have a partnership with your local school system, or if you're joining us as a school librarian, just wanted to shout out some of those nonfiction titles that are really great for integrating in a curriculum. Encouraging browsing. So I think there are different ways that you can do this depending on how you organize your graphic novels, whether it's across different genres or if you have your graphic novels section of your collection. But one thing you can do with book displays is encourage browsing, and maybe with either each book display that you create, including a graphic novel, and encouraging and having signage to have people flip through. But I feel like that's the easiest way really to get people to explore, see what art style connects with them. For me, I'm such a mood reader. I bounce across genre, but art style is really the main thing that piques my interest with graphic novels. This is Square Eyes, which is a fantastic graphic novel. Very dreamlike kind of illustration that is an example of sharing art style. One thing that we did want to cover is outreach ideas. So Caroline's going to share a couple here.
Yeah, so you can bring graphic novels into outreach. In the past, when we used to host Comics Fest here at Durham County Library before COVID, while most of the events, especially the big day event on that Saturday of like the Comics Fest week, would take place inside the library, but we did have several events that took place outside of the library. I know we've done like trivia at like coffee shops or breweries in Durham. We've gone to, I know we still host the Triangle Comic Creators Group, which is a group of local comic creators in the Triangle, and there's collaboration. I believe the librarians who currently host it collaborate with Raleigh and Chapel Hill in some way. I don't know if they collaborate with the libraries there or if they collaborate with like more of like the independent bookstores in Raleigh and Chapel Hill, but it is hosted in Durham currently. You can do book talks with graphic novels in a classroom. Again, you feel free to use RoboCop for Kids with Dogman if you'd like to. I don't know if like kids today know who RoboCop is. And then programs that I have done is zine making. I've gone to different like zine events, either at the LGBTQ Center in Durham or on like campuses to talk about zine making. There's a very easy craft where you can fold a piece of paper and make a quick zine out of it. And that makes, graphic novels or like the creation of graphic novels more accessible to kids who might not feel creative or adults who might not feel like creative. They can learn how to create in this sort of like quick and easy way. And of course, partnering with different comic stores in the area is a great resource to use for outreach opportunities and a good way to collaborate, especially if you wanted to host an author. I know with Comics Fest, we hosted several authors over the years. And we tended to shy away from superhero comics and we focused more on the memoir, more realistic comics with like authors that we chose. So I know we had Jen Wang one year, we had Raina Telgemeier one year before she got like really, really big. I'm trying to think of who else we had. I know we had George O'Connor who wrote the Greek gods graphic novels. We had him a couple years because he does such a great presentation for all ages. So we had to have him back like the following year because he was so much fun to have. But yeah, there's many different programs that you can do surrounding graphic novels and kind of doing outreach with and incorporating graphic novels into outreach.
So I do want to make sure that we have time to get to questions. These are just some quick marketing tips that are included in the slide deck. So one thing that I want to jump to is QR codes next to book displays. I think that can be a great way to integrate novelists, increase some usage for that resource, and have patrons feel empowered to explore their own tastes in the resource. So again, you can use the permalinks on any of the recorded or recommended reads list pages, and link to them next to book displays. If you want to link your catalog to novelists, that's something that you can set up. If you have questions about how to do that, email help@nclive.org. Making novelists findable on your library's website can be a great way to draw patrons in using graphics that we've created or Novelist has created that you can download from our website. Focusing on different audiences can be a great way to increase engagement and bring in new graphic novel readers potentially, and with those promotional materials. So you can download social media graphics from our website. We have a new system set up for that, but you can also, in a shopping cart like experience, order glossy print materials. So novelist bookmarks, posters, flyers, for free, and then novelists will create those. They will be shipped to you, and we just operate like a middleman in that process. So if you want to explore our promotional materials, we have a lot here that you can use. So just something to check out for later. And then here, monthly marketing emails can be a great way to find different social media graphics that we've developed for different resources like Novelist. So if you haven't signed up for that, that comes out the first of every month. But that's a great tool because you can just go through the list and click, download, reshare as many social media graphics that we've created. We do that so that our libraries do not have to reinvent the wheel, but can use what we have already created. And then in terms of getting in touch, feel free to reach out to me if you have any novelist-specific questions, training questions. If you have any resource issues, outages, weird error messages that you see, don't hesitate to email help@nclive.org. And then Caroline has also included her email if you'd like to reach out to her and ask her more about graphic novels. Now we have a question that I do want to make sure that we get to. Could you explain the differences between manga types aside from shoujo and shonen? I know Novelist mentions seinen and josei manga too. Could be good for finding recommendations for adult manga readers.
I will be the first to admit that I have not read too much of adult manga. I mostly read like the nostalgic titles that like I grew up with, and then like I'm familiar with like current children and teen manga, but I'm not very familiar with adult manga at all. My guess, and this is just me inferencing, is that it'll probably be somewhat similar with like more like action oriented comics for men and romance for women, but that's again just guessing based on shonen and sojo comics or manga comics, that you can find for children and teens. But yeah, no, I am not sure. This is actually the first time I've encountered those terms just because I don't read adult manga whatsoever, and I don't typically do readers advisory for adults, unfortunately.
One thing that you can do within Novelist that I think I've linked to in the handout, and if I didn't, I'll make sure to, is the full list of field codes, as well as the story elements. Let me see. Oh, it's a broken link. I'll update it. But Novelist does have a full glossary of all the story elements, all the appeals that they use. And so they might have a good definition to work from. James is sharing, it just refers to books marketed or written with the intent of adult male or female readers, just as shonen and shoujo. Okay, which can be very broad. John sharing a good author for adult manga with very solid historical themes would be Kaiju, author of Lone Wolf and Cub. It's one of my favorite adult manga. I will also be saving the chat and some of these recommendations I'll add to the handout because y'all had some really good suggestions here. And so thank you all for including that. Quentin asking, we are a tiny branch of a very small system with a limited budget. Any purchasing tips regarding making selections when many series can be so long running? Great question. Caroline, do you have thoughts on that?
I think going for popularity versus getting those smaller titles. Again, like I know Naruto and One Piece are some of the more longer running series, but they're still so good to have. And get checked out, at least at my library, they circulate so quickly. It's not right now, One Piece takes up about 3 shelves in my graphic novel collection, in the teen area, and it's not uncommon to go over to that section and see, like, 2 empty shelves because someone is checked out, you know, the latter half of One Piece in like one fell swoop. So I think going for popularity, even though they are longer running series, when I worked in a rural library in Georgia, we ended up like getting a lot of our graphic novel collection from donations, and adding those into the collection. But I know different libraries have different collection development policies. But that was how we ended up building our graphic novel collection, was through donations or with money from our friends of the library, and our small rural Georgia library.
Quentin, also, if you want to reply in the chat, if you are from North Carolina Public Library, if your library is part of NC Cardinal, that can be a great way to have interlibrary loan and have titles sent from different NC Cardinal libraries to your library. If a patron has a very niche title that they're looking for, that can be a good way to do that. All right. Any other questions? Yeah. So Quentin, yeah, I would definitely check out if your library is part of NC Cardinal, because that can be something that you can share with patrons. I feel like the magic of interlibrary loan is not always discussed in public libraries, but it can be a really powerful tool. All right. Well, we are right at 3:15, so we used every minute we had and covered a lot of ground. But I will have to thank my fantastic co-host, Caroline, for bringing your knowledge. It was so great to lead this with you. Folks, if you want to check out, we have another Reader's Advisory webinar next month, Cracking the Case, Mastering the Mystery/Thriller genre. And my co-host for that will be Jennifer Stewart from Haywood County Public Library, where she hosts the Grounds for Murder book club. So if you're looking for titles beyond the usual suspects like James Patterson and John Grisham, and want to build your skills with that genre and Reader's Advisory, just know that you can register for that as well. But thank you all so much for joining us this rainy afternoon in North Carolina. I hope you all are staying dry. Keep an eye out for that follow-up email tomorrow. All right. And thank you all so much.